Evening. The Wednesday, February 12th, Operations Safety and Security Committee will now come to order. We are convened as of 5:33 p.m. I would respectfully ask everyone attending this meeting to mute yourself unless you're recognized to speak. Please note that committee meetings of the RTD Board of Directors will be held remotely via Zoom and will be audio and video recorded. The meeting recordings, along with unofficial minutes of the meetings, will be posted as soon as practical on the board's website. During today's meeting, we are providing communication access real-time translation, also known as CART. Anyone who would like to access this service should send an email to the RTD board office at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com, and a link will be provided. Additionally, the CART transcript can be automatically translated into Spanish for anyone who would like access to a live transcript of this meeting in Spanish. A live stream of this meeting is also available on RTD's YouTube page. I would now like to call the roll for our committee members. Director Busick.
Here.
Wonderful. Director Chandler.
Present.
Happy to have you. Director Harwick.
Here.
Love it. Thanks for joining us. Director Nicholson.
I am here.
Thank you. Nice to see you. Director Pagliari.
Present.
Awesome. Director Whitmore.
I am here.
Wouldn't be a meeting without you. And I am Chair Joanne Rusha, and I am also present. So for the record, I see we have all 7 directors present with us today. I would now like to open public comment to anyone who would like to address the committee regarding any topic listed in the published meeting agenda for the current and immediately preceding month. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please either raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. During this time, the committee will not offer any direct comments or responses. However, if you would like to be contacted regarding your public comment, please email the RTD board at rtd.directors@rtd-denver.com. Mr. Kroll, do we have any hands raised or public comments or anyone in the queue?
Yes, Committee Chair Rusha, we do have one hand raised, and that is from a former director. We have former director Jamie Lewis present.
Good evening. The Honorable Jamie Lewis, you are recognized. Welcome. We have missed you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tonight there will be a request for an additional $2 million from the board to ensure that Access on Demand service is funded through 2025. CCDC, in which I am the transit advisor of that group, supports this action and agrees with staff that this action is needed. While staff formulates changes to TOD to ensure its long-term financial stability, it is important to continue this service without interruption. On another issue, the recommended action from the Federal Transit Administration to require drug testing for TNCs is another hurdle that RTD must face. I would hope that RTD is transparent and open to the public on this matter. We need the same fervor as we did to address changes to AOD by communicating with the disability community and bringing those to the table, i.e. Uber, Lyft, Skip, and Metro Taxi. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. You're welcome to come back anytime. Mr. Kroll, is there anyone else with their hands raised?
Yes, at this time, Committee Chair Rusha, I see 2 additional hands raised. The first is from Bob Diniger.
Okay, Mr. Diniger, welcome to OSS. You are recognized.
Thank you. Good evening. I was pleased to see this committee's work plan will include a review of RTD policies and hope that will include taking a close look at the habitual outsourcing of half of the agency's fixed bus routes to Transdev, a contractor that is 67% controlled by the French government. These are trying times. The stresses of uncertainty and a looming sense of powerlessness do not make for a healthy atmosphere. Each of us has a responsibility to ourselves and to each other to look out for our mental health. I'm here to say a few words about an incident involving a fellow bus driver I worked with at Transdev. In September 2005, long before I knew him, my friend Shimmels made his way from Ethiopia to the United States, hoping to find a better life. Within about a year, on the Sunday before Thanksgiving of 2006, he was overjoyed to start his first day driving an RTD bus. For the next 19 years, Shimmels Tedeschi showed up for work every day, faithfully pursuing the American dream. He was glad to have the opportunity to provide for his family, no matter if he had to go out in sub-zero weather, snowy streets, or even during the dark days of the pandemic. Shimmels showed up, dealt with the frustrations and occasional abuse from thoughtless passengers, and did his job. Shimmels has a quiet dignity about him, always has a big, bright smile. He takes great pride in his appearance and is fastidious about washing his hands. Unfortunately, his fastidious nature and the stresses of his job apparently led to an incident where he was about to wash his hands in the restroom at the Broomfield station, and there was no soap in the dispenser. So in frustration, he yanked it off the wall and threw it outside. On January 8th, he was called into Transdev General Manager Seidel Sobervia's office and told that RTD had seen him do this on camera and advised Transdev to fire him. He was handed his final paycheck and asked for his employee badge. Shimmels has apologized and shed tears over this. His 13-year-old daughter is outraged. She asks, how could they do this after 19 years? He'd simply like his job back. No one was hurt. I hope we can all agree. That's only fair. We can do better than this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diniger. Mr. Kroll, who is our next speaker?
Yes, next we have Nate Trela.
Nate, I'm sorry, what was the last name?
Trela?
Trela? Okay, Mr. Trela, you are recognized, and we generally permit 3 minutes for public comment. I will ask Mr. Kroll to keep the time, if that, okay, looks like I have a nod there. You are recognized, you may speak.
Great, appreciate it. Yes, I'm Nate Trela, Ringlewood. I am a Secretary of the Blind Parents Division of the National Federation of Blind of Colorado, and I appreciate the chance to speak to the committee today. I just wanted to first off encourage the board to adopt the additional funding for the Access on Demand program. I appreciate the way the board and staff has really taken to heart the input that's come in so far and has revisited the original proposals for revamping the program and is being more thoughtful and considerate of all the input that's come in so far. For the board members, both returning and those sworn in not long ago and beginning their terms, this is an issue that has been front and center for more than a year now for many of us many of us with disabilities, many of us who use paratransit, and I look forward to hopefully seeing some real progress towards a revised system that's both financially responsible while still maintaining the great quality of service that for a program that's been life-changing for many, many passengers in the metro area. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kroll, do we have anyone else in the queue?
Committee Chair Rusha, at this time I see no further hands raised.
Okay, and were there any emailed comments received for today's meeting?
Yes, Committee Chair Rusha, you all received 2 emails, one from Greater Denver Transit commenting on the Access on Demand item before you all, as well as the security contract scope of work item before you all. In addition to that, you all received an email from Mr. Joseph Meyer with respect to the discussion related to the May 2025 service changes.
Thank you, sir. I will also note that we did receive the directors, the board received an email from Miss Mary Hennick, and she asked for her email to be included for today's public comment. So I will forward that to you for the transcript. Thank you. All right. So with no other participants in the queue, we will close the public comment period at this time and move into our recommended actions. So there are 4 recommended actions on the agenda this evening. The first item is for the 2025 and funding. Before I begin, just want to advise that as we go into our action items, today we will take questions first before comments. Sometimes folks have the same question as others, but it's pretty common in parliamentary procedure to do that. So I know traditionally we've combined questions and comments, but first we're going to ask for what we would call a question or point of clarification. Then we'll move into discussion. Everyone will have a chance to speak, I promise. All right, so the 2025 Access on Demand funding action item reads as follows. For the Board of Directors to authorize the General Manager and CEO or her designee to provide additional funding of $15,814,441 for the Access on Demand program, raising the not to exceed amount from 21.9 to 37.8 million, and delegating authority to amend the contracts with existing providers to increase the current amount of program funding for the remainder of the term of the contracts, which expire December 31st, 2025. Do we have a motion?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I move to amend the motion.
Thank you, Director Nicholson, but I need to get this motion moved first, and then
I
you may
understand.
make
Sorry.
your amendment.
My apologies.
No worries. If you would like to help us speed along, you could.
Busick, so moved.
Thank
I'll
you.
second Whitmore.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Rescued by Directors Busick and Whitmore, respectively. Okay, so I would like to, and we will get to Director Nicholson, but we're going to ask Fred Worthen to go ahead and present, and then you may go ahead and offer your motion to amend, okay?
Thank
So
you.
you got it. So I would like to ask Fred Worthen, Assistant General Manager, Bus Operations, and Paul Hamilton, Paratransit Services, to present this item. So at this time, I would ask directors who have questions and you would like to speak to raise your virtual hands, and I will call on you. Sorry, I should pause. We're going to let our presenters present before I get ahead with questions. Even I skipped ahead in the script. So with that, I will turn it over to whomever would like to present this item from staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Chair Ruscia. I'm Fred Worthen, Assistant General Manager of Bus Operations. Again, staff is requesting the Board of Directors to authorize the General Manager and CEO or designee to provide additional funding for the Access on Demand program, as Director Ruscia, as Committee Chair Ruscia brought forth in the recommended actions. To be clear, this request is strictly to fund the existing Access on Demand program as it is currently structured. Staff intends to bring proposed recommended policy changes regarding Access-a-Ride and Access on Demand in March 2025 for the discussion, and in April or May, a recommended action for the board's consideration. As a bit of background, RTD currently has 2 paratransit service programs, Access-a-Ride and Access on Demand. Access-a-Ride is a paratransit service federally mandated by the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. It is a complementary service to supplement regular fixed route services. It is a shared ride service intended for those who cannot use regular fixed route or bus or light rail service due to a disability. Customers must meet eligibility requirements established under ADA legislations. Customers may book trips up to 1 to 7 days in advance of the requested services, and all customers pay a base fare for all trips. All Access-a-Ride vehicles are currently branded and wheelchair accessible. Access on Demand, which we are here bringing forward to you tonight, a resolution to continue funding for, is a supplemental premium paratransit service. It is not federally mandated. It is a subsidized curb-to-curb and rideshare option available to current eligible Access-a-Ride customers. RTD pays the first $25 of a trip. Customers may use up to 60 trips per month on any of 4 network providers of services. Access on Demand has grown substantially since pilot inception. Background on the development and growth on the Access on Demand program is included in your board packet. Approximately half of our current active Access-a-Ride customers use Access on Demand. Of those, approximately 20% of our customers use a mix of Access-a-Ride and Access on Demand services, and approximately 30% of our active paratransit customers utilize Access on Demand solely. The number of customers who solely use Access on Demand services has been steadily increasing. Although the initial pilot was designed to help supplement Access-a-Ride services, an entirely new market has risen from the program as it currently functions. With that information as a backdrop, that concludes my presentation, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. That was a robust set of facts and information for us to consider. So as noted, the RTD staff, will also present their recommended changes next month. And then I believe they will present an action item for us to take formal action in May. Now, as noted before, we're going to open this up for clarifying questions. No, we don't add information or add our thoughts or opinions, just clarifying questions only, so that you're able to make an informed decision on this vote. So if we have any questions, I will go ahead and take them now. Oh, that was a lot of hands at once. Director Pagliari, I see you on my screen first. You are recognized.
Thank you. This is Director Pagliari. Thank you, Chair. My first question is simply, why is $2 million needed now and not budgeted for last year? Thank you.
I will leave that up to whomever would like to address that.
If I may.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. GMCO Johnson, you are recognized. Please.
Thank you. Good evening, all. Deborah Johnson, General Manager and CEO. As it relates to why $2 million wasn't budgeted, we did budget for the program, recognizing the information that Mr. Worthen set forward relative to anticipated program modifications upon engaging with the community, specifically advocacy groups in particular. We garnered some input and thought it would be most prudent for us to take into consideration the feedback that we had received, recognizing when we began the budget process, which commenced in and around the summer of 2024 and moving forward, we allocated monies for the program pursuant to the data we had in relationship to where we stand, recognizing that Mr. Worthen outlined that we may be bringing back policy recommendations to this board for consideration. That will delay the timeframe in which we saw, hence the request for $2 million to fund the program in its current state. That may not be needed, but we wanted to ensure that we were erring on the side of caution relative to continuing providing service in a manner for this population. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry. Well, we can co-chair together. Freudian slip. Okay, thank you, General Manager, CEO, Ms. Johnson. I see Director Nicholson, I see your hand in the queue. If you have just a question that you'd like to get out of the way, we're more than happy to entertain that.
No, I'll let Director Chandler go before me, and then I'll offer my amendment.
Okay, thank you, sir. Director Chandler, you're recognized. Welcome.
Thank you. My question is, what do you think has attributed to the increase in use? Is there a program that is being permeated? I mean, because a part of this is when something is being not so used, and then all of a sudden it's exponential. In fact, you were saying a lot of people are using the Access on Demand exclusively and not using Access-a-Ride. What do you attribute that increase of usage? Because I think that has a lot to do with, obviously, the increase of costs that we're trying to combat.
Thank you, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Again, Fred Worthen, AGM Bus Operations. Excellent question. There are actually a multitude of factors that have contributed to the rising popularity of the program itself. For one, there is not a fare upfront. The RTD pays the first $25 of a trip, so there is no out-of-pocket cost itself. Additionally, currently, the Access-a-Ride services are limited to within 3/4 of a mile of our fixed route services and train stations. Access on Demand is actually open to our entire service area. So it is available to some clients that may not have a trip that would qualify underneath the Americans with Disabilities Act. Additionally, the Access-a-Ride services are limited to mirror our fixed route services. So the hours and days of service are similar to our fixed route. The Access on Demand is 24/7 availability itself. So those are some of the factors that are differences in the program that have led to a completely new market. There are other things that I will talk about next month during the full committee presentation, but I think those are some of the major driving factors for the question that you've asked.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Absolutely.
And so really, truly, I think what's happening here is my perception is that as a access on demand rider, you're getting better service, right? Because you're getting from point A to point B quicker, faster, more reliable. You don't have to set it so far in advance. So is this really about that need or the fact that the service is better? Do you have any idea of what might kind of drive that forward? Because that would be my reasoning why I would use it instead of using just a normal Access-a-Ride.
The advanced availability is another particular area. Again, there are a lot of other driving factors, but the three that I mentioned are the most prominent of driving factors for the popularity of the program itself. I wouldn't say that it is a better service. I would say that it offers different amenities and offers a different service level than we have with Access-a-Ride itself. We've done a lot to improve the Access-a-Ride. When I first came to, I took over paratransit. Our on-time performance for pickups was in the upper 70 percentile range. We're picking up now in the upper 90 percentile range itself, but we still have opportunities to improve Access-a-Ride, and I'll talk more about those things next month.
Thank you, Mr. Worthen. Director Chandler, do you have any other follow-up questions? All right, thank you. I also see that we have Director Banker. Thank you for joining us. I apologize, I neglected to mention that we also had Director Guzman joining, although he might have lost his connection, and we have Committee Chair Bouquet. So again, I apologize for not recognizing you earlier. Thanks for joining. I'm going to go ahead and call on Director Banker.
Madam Chair, thank you. I just wanted some clarification because as I'm reading the recommended action, are you asking to go from 21.9 million to 37.8? But I hear folks talking about just a $2 million increase. Could you clarify?
I believe our general manager would like, I can answer that, but I'll defer to our general manager.
Yes, I see General Manager's hand is raised. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
So thank you very much, Committee Chair Arusha, and thank you, Director Banker, for the question. So basically what we had put forward was that there's 13 million roughly that was appropriated by the Board of Directors in the fiscal year budget of 2025. In relationship to the program modification, which we were anticipating to happen, that has not yet occurred, we are asking for an additional $2 million from the, my gosh, I'm looking at the funding source, the unrestricted.
Unrestricted reserves.
Yes, thank you very much, Fred. Unrestricted reserves. So that's what's being called into question relative to the conversations that have ensued.
If I may elaborate a little further too, I think what you're asking is there's differences in numbers. When we started with the initial contract, it was a 3-year contract funded for approximately $9 million. Over the course of the 3 years, we have had to increase the funding itself. The 37 million is the projected cost for the entire 3 years of the Access on Demand program. All we're asking for, though, is to fund the remaining 2025 budget and to give us contract authority to be able to pay the full contract itself.
Okay, thank you. That
Is
definitely.
that helpful?
Yes.
I have a piggyback to that one, Mr. Worthen or GM CEO Johnson. So last year in our budget, we had collectively authorized a little more than $13.2 million as noted. In the board report, it says that we haven't tabulated all invoices, and it probably takes our vendors time, to get that to us. But we are looking at about $11.1 million. So does that mean that the remainder, what is that, 2.8 million and change, would have just gone back into the unrestricted reserves because it's the end of the year and we didn't use it? Or are you asking for an additional 2 million on top of that remainder?
I'm not sure if Mr. McLeod is on or not. I think that would be a better question answered for him with regard to remaining dollars at the end of the fiscal year. If Mr. McLeod is not available, we can definitely get that question answered for you. But my understanding is that any budgeted dollars that aren't expended go back into the general reserve fund itself.
Mr. Worthen, if I may, CFO McLeod is on, and he can provide a response relative to that. Mr. McLeod, are you able to do so?
Yes, good evening. This is Doug McLeod, Chief Financial Officer. Yeah, that is correct. Any unused funding would go back into the general fund. However, for certain projects, any unused funding, we would carry that funding forward. In this case, it would go back into the unrestricted reserve.
Thank you. That answers my question. So I guess what I'm also hearing is that in the end, the $2 million is, I don't know, either a wash or we just ran into the thing called January. But I will go ahead and see if any other directors have their hands raised for questions. I see no other hands raised for questions, I believe, except Director Nicholson. I know you also wanted to offer an amendment, possibly have a question. So we'll go ahead and yield. Oh, well, we'll yield the floor to you. It is your turn, sir. Thank you for being patient.
I try. I actually have a question for CFO McLeod. Can you speak to how much money was handed back from, or if any, from Access on Demand at the end of last year? You said that money would be if there was any. Can you speak to if that took place and how much?
Madam Chair.
Oh, yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. Doug McLeod. Yes, we do not have that number just yet. With fiscal year end, it takes us a little extra time to process and gather all the invoices, as was mentioned earlier. There's a lag time in those invoices coming in. We want to get them all in or accrued by year end. So we don't have that number just yet, but we can provide it at a later time.
Great. Yeah, sorry, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say that definitely would be a useful piece of information to have when we're looking in the future at the changes we may or may not make to Access on Demand. So that would be helpful. Continuing on, Madam Chair, if I may make a motion.
You may.
Thank you. Chair Rusha, I move to amend the motion on the table by striking the number 15,814,441 and replacing it with 13,814,441, as well as striking the number 37.8 million and replacing it with 35.8 million. So 37.8 to 35.8, and then 15. It's the version that was sent by email to you and the rest of the committee. Actually, I think all of the directors just before the meeting.
Thank you, Director Nicholson. So just to understand your motion to amend, you are seeking to reduce the requested authorization by $2 million.
That's correct. And then to also modify the not to exceed to match that.
Thank you, sir. Okay, do we have a second?
So moved.
That I heard Director Chandler as a second. Okay, so we have an amendment on the table. Director Nicholson, as this was your motion, I will go ahead and let you speak first to your amendment. You are
Thank you.
recognized.
All right. According to the January board briefing documents, our sales and use collection year to date back in November was down 8.2% versus what was budgeted, which is about $69,123,000. That's nearly equivalent to the $69,240,000 that we took in sales and use tax in November. So our sales tax revenues are essentially an entire month short, according to the most recent data that we published. Our unrestricted reserve that those $2 million would come from is currently at $338,207,000 for fiscal year 2025. That sounds like a lot. The problem is it's budgeted to drop down to only $4 million by 2029 in our 5-year forecast. In September, Access on Demand cost $1.029 million. We estimated in the same September presentation that it would cost $1.17 million for December, but we obviously, as Doug McLeod said, don't have the full numbers yet. This original request that was the recommended action puts us at $1.317 million on average for the next year. It's time to recognize that we don't have unlimited money and we have many, many other things we need to pay for. With the uncertainty looming at the federal level over a substantial portion of our budget, we need to be fiscally responsible now. I am more than open to funding this program at a higher level than this amendment seeks after we have had a full conversation about the long-term cost. But this agenda item does not do that. It asks for more money before we have had any opportunity to weigh the competing priorities, which we would be taking from, and which our budget process was designed for. Accessibility is extremely important, but our job as directors is not to allow any one issue to take precedence over the fiscal health of the agency. This is not a politically easy thing to do, but the voters sent us here to make hard choices. I ask for your support for this motion.
All right, thank you, Director Nicholson. Do we have any other directors who would like to offer any comment? Seeing, oh, I'm sorry, Director Chandler, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Chair Rusha. I agree with Director Nicholson. This is a very difficult decision to make. We all want and recognize that paratransit is extremely important, and access for the least of these, for those that go and need transit, those that are dependent, is extremely important. But I don't believe that all options have been discussed, nor do I think that by giving an additional $2 million up front, will this ever be clawed back? I mean, no agency I've ever known has received money and then eventually given it back. So what we need to do is come up with better solutions before we start funding something really with limited discussion. So I would concur with Director Nicholson, even though this is a very difficult decision. It is the best for the health of the overall agency. And in reality, it's the best for the health of furthering paratransit for those that are dependent upon it.
Thank you, Director Chandler. I see Director Pagliari, and then we'll move on to Director Banker. Director Pagliari, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. This is Director Pagliari. Very quickly, I agree with Director Nicholson, and I also echo a lot of Director Chandler's concerns about putting us, like, this is not an easy decision, but I think it's a decision that we have to make because we are going to be discussing it next month, I believe. I think that it will not do very much harm if we simply go back to what was budgeted from last year, taking into account the rough financial forecast we anticipate, and discuss real solutions and permanent ways to actually expand and learn how much the options are going to cost. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Pagliari. I will go ahead and recognize Director Banker, and then CFO McLeod. I'll probably call on you just to speak to the financial outlook and our 5-year financial plan. So be at the ready, please. Director Banker, please go ahead.
Just a quick observation. We're only 6 weeks into the new fiscal year. And it just seems going forward with a supplemental of this size seems to be perhaps too early. I think it would be good to see in the next couple of months how usage and costs are occurring over the next few weeks and months. And it would also give us an opportunity to dig a little deeper into the program, especially for some of us new folks that have a lot to learn. I would like to learn more about how this program works and how it interacts with Access-a-Ride, since I was one of the original board members who voted to approve Access-a-Ride back into the 1990s, again, showing my age. So I would just, granted, I cannot vote, but I would just encourage that we wait a little while.
Thank you, Director Baker. And I also see Director Busick has his hand up. I'll go ahead and recognize you, sir.
Thank you, Chair Rusha. Just a couple quick comments. The $2 million increase in funding is to maintain the status quo while we continue, as I know our GMCEO and others have been doing for months, to analyze access on demand services and funding. Not authorizing $2 million is in essence a cut to their funding. And if anybody needs this service, it's the disability community. And I'm not a big fan of taking away their services without, a full analysis of what's going on. And we're still in the heart of that. And because we're only maintaining status quo, I think it's the least we can do for this community. I'm not a big fan of the Elon Musk style of, well, you need to live within your budget, and that's just the way it is. There's a lot more nuance to this whole thing, and I'm not going to support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Director Harwick.
This is for
Chair
Ed.
Harwick. I'm sorry. I violated my own rule of decorum.
Don't worry about it.
May proceed.
Fred, this so I'm just kind of curious. Given that we've seen a fairly substantial rise in these costs over time, like, are we pretty sure this is gonna get us there? Or are we worried that I know we're getting an update next month, but also just curious, like, are we worried we're still gonna come in short and then we're gonna have to go back and ask for more money as we get, like October, November? Or do you think this has got us covered?
If I may?
Yes. Please proceed, Ms. Johnson. Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. And so basically to the question that was posed by Vice Chair Harwick, that's exactly what we're trying to do going forward, recognizing that we have contracted with third-party entities and those invoices have yet to come in. What we had forecasted relative to what's outlined in the board report is predicated upon what we saw relative to usage, utilizing the TNCs and the taxi company going forward. And so the reason why we're asking for the $2 million in relationship to where we are is so we would not necessarily have to come back to the board and make an additional amendment to the third-party contracts that are already set to sunset at December 31st, 2025. There could be the situation whereby we have this mitigated going forward in reference to putting forward staff proposed recommendations from a policy vantage point, and then put those solicitations out to work in tandem with third parties that could decrease the costs we're spending, or it could be a different level of a program. You heard relative to public comment about the Federal Transit Administration in December of 2024, the previous presidential administration, Biden-Harris, within the ranks of the FTA, put forward a proposed policy statement that may require operators of transportation network companies to be subjected to alcohol and drug testing. In working with a myriad of different transit agencies and APTA, we're providing comments. It's a new administration. We don't know if that comes to fruition. Those elements will help inform decisions relative to modifications to the program. Hence, we don't know what we don't know. And to the point that was just raised by Director Busick, the request for $2 million would help bridge that gap. So we're not going back to a third-party contractor and making another amendment when we can do that in one fell swoop. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. I also I'm going to go ahead and offer an observation and also just to recap what happened last year. So we had last month at public comment, someone said that I'm paraphrasing. Nothing is more frustrating when your boss tells you to do X and then you get frustrated and then you do it, and then they get frustrated because you didn't do Y. And to be very clear, both board directors and community members went to RTD and leadership and our general manager and asked for this program to be funded without cuts through 2025. And that is precisely what we did. We have already authorized this funding. We just ran into what I said before, which was kind of a January problem. Normally, these are multi-year appropriations, so we don't do this every January, but because of a quirk and potential pending changes, the chips just fell where they were. But we did make a very, very public commitment as a board, and our GM CEO made a very public commitment last fall that we would continue to fund this program fully through the end of the year. And I think we should keep that promise. So thank you for entertaining my comments. I will go ahead and recognize, and I don't know whose hands went up in what order, but I'm going to go ahead and recognize Director Guzman and then Director Catlin, who has also joined us, as they have not had a chance to speak. Then I will return to directors on the committee. Director Guzman, you are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I echo your sentiment. We did appropriate this money last year, and we did make the commitment to the paratransit community that rely on access on demand. As far as this amendment goes, I am not a member of your committee, but I would strongly vote against it and take the original request from staff and move forward with that for a number of reasons. One, this seems to suggest that our sales and use tax is not going to continue to increase. That is not the information we currently have. That is not backed up by the studies by the CU Lead School of Business presented in the 5-year fiscal plan, their forecast for sales and use tax in the state of Colorado, particular to our region, and the current information that was utilized for this from the November dates heavily relies on a time of year for a month snapshot where we are traditionally going to see a downturn and not an upturn in sales and use tax collections, because it does not calculate for the holiday spending that occurs at that time of year. We don't have those numbers yet. So I think it's a bit faulty and a knee-jerk reaction to look at only 1 month's information and not take into consideration the 5-year planning process that goes into the making of the budget. Those assumptions are clearly outlaid in our budget book that was presented last year, was presented the year before, and will be presented again at the end of this year going into the following year based on sound information. Our conservative fiscal policies, furthermore, ensure that we have the finances in place to be able to do this. And while we do see a drawdown of funds over the course of the next 5 to 7 years in our unrestricted fund, that is because there are some major purchases that are planned for which our current board policies require us to use cash on hand and not take a COP, a bond, or a loan to make those purchases or investments into the system. That's why that money is there. It is there for this purpose. And I think it is unwise to amend what has been presented here. And I would not be saying that if I hadn't done all of the digging to try and figure out where those numbers were coming from that are suggested with the speaking points that were sent out to us. But I would tell you from the finance point of view, the $2 million that's being requested is reasonable to request. The ability for the general manager and CEO to be delegated the authority to amend our contracts and to consider modifying any terms of service are important, because that's a delegation we give to her. We ourselves as directors do not do that. And we have received the commitment, both on the record in multiple meetings about this particular issue with the access on demand, that we will have a thorough vetting with plenty of public input on the matter for us to consider going forward. But as far as this year goes, considering that already we're talking about the difference between of a $2 million difference. I just don't see the sense in modifying this at this time. If you would like further explanation on that, I would defer kindly to our CFO, Doug McLeod. But everything that I have seen for the last 2 years on this board indicates that we will see steady and continued sales and use tax growth. Is that going to be enough to cover all the costs of the system? Absolutely not. Are we going to have to enter into conversations that are serious about what our budget looks like and what priorities are? Definitely, that's our job as directors. But $2 million to be offered for this with the delegation of authority to be able to use some of that up to a maximum amount, that seems a logical conclusion. So that's my 2 cents on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Guzman. I actually would call on CFO McLeod, and I would also offer that our F&P chair answered most of the question I was going to ask. So thank you, Director Guzman. But CFO McLeod, could you please address, per our policy or under state law, if this action item passes today and at our regular board meeting, would that be considered a budget amendment? Would we have to file additional paperwork?
Thank you, Chair Rusha. This is Doug McLeod, Chief Financial Officer. No, it would not require a budget amendment. We may transfer money within the actual appropriated budget. You may recall that when we ask for the appropriation, we also include the fund balances, which would include the unrestricted fund balance that is available for appropriation when that permission is given. In this case, we're asking for a transfer from the unrestricted balance. Typically, what would happen if we were later in the fiscal year is that we would have other budget line item savings for various reasons. Perhaps a project was started late, we don't need the full year budget funding. We would take that particular line item and request that be transferred out from that expense line item over to access on demand. In this case, because we're so early in the year, we really don't know what our variances are. So we're just requesting that it would come from the unrestricted fund. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I am happy to wax poetic about utility curves all day long, but when it comes to the finer points of our fiscal policy and state law, that's when I phone a friend. Director Catlin, thank you for joining us. You're recognized.
Thank you. I've actually been here the whole meeting, but
I apologize. I apologize.
No problem. I very much appreciate the fiscal responsibility expressed by our 3 directors on this matter. That being said, I live in an area where I've received a number of comments and frustrated comments from people who would ordinarily be able to use Access-a-Ride, but because the routes to Evergreen and Conifer are considered commuter routes, if you're 3/4 of a mile from those routes, they're not eligible. So there's a large part of my district that does not have that availability. And if I'm hearing Mr. Worthen correctly, this access on demand has much broader reach than the Access-a-Ride. And so I ordinarily would err on the side of fiscal prudence, but in this case, I think there's some opportunities to serve some underserved populations in a number of remote districts. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Catlin. Director Chandler, you're recognized.
Thank you again, Director Rusha, Chair Rusha. And I agree with what Peggy is saying. In fact, that's the whole point, right? Is that as the costs are going up and so is the accessibility. People want this service because it is so flexible, because it does provide that additional service. But the point is that it's expensive. So what we need to do is probably revamp the existing Access-a-Ride and the existing access on demand to accommodate those. By funding it little by little, like what we're doing, is we're not going to push it to conclude what needs to change in order to make it better and more fiscally sound. So I'm actually wanting this to go forward so that we can have a good discussion on what would make this better. Because as more people find out what Peggy just talked about, what Director Catlin just talked about, the more they're going to want to use it, and the more the costs are going to continue to go up. So I'm voting for this only because I think it will foster a broader, bigger discussion, which will be better in the long run and more robust for those that actually do need the service, and those that maybe should have a different service instead of using the more expensive service up front.
Thank you, Director Chandler. Director Nicholson, I see your hand raised.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to respond to some comments. So the first thing I would say is that allocating $13 million when we have budgeted $13 million is not a cut. It is allocating the exact same amount of money that we said in December, or rather this previous board said in December was enough money to fund the program. If there was a necessity to fund the program at a higher level, one would have expected that would have made it into the actual budget process. So my primary objection here is that we're coming right after, literally less than 60 days, around 60 days after the budget was passed, and saying, oh no, we need more money. And it's not just like 2% more, it's 15% more money in a year when our forecast, I'm reading, Director Guzman said, we're forecast to have more money. This is the budget summary. This is the first line of the budget summary for the 2025 budget. This is for anyone who wants the reference, page 45. RTD's 2025 operating revenue budget is expected to decrease in the forthcoming year compared to one-time revenues budgeted in 2024. We are going to have less money this year. The state also is projecting it's going to have less money. That's why they're cutting their budget by hundreds of millions of dollars this year. The federal government, we don't know right now. It could be that all of our grants are great, and a year from now, nothing has changed. But looking at what has happened over the last month, I would be willing to bet that some of them are going to be affected. And we are going to be out, due to the work of this federal government, substantially more than $2 million. And so given that level of uncertainty, this is just saying we need to postpone this conversation until later, until we actually need the money, or at minimum, till when we are talking about the future of the program. So this does not say you have to making this amendment does not say there's no more money for access on. It is impossible for us to allocate more money in the future. It just said, as I think it was either Fred Worthen or CEO McLeod pointed out, later in the year, we will have a better understanding of what the trade-offs are, because we'll see the things that are going well, expensive, cheaper, whatever. And holding off on this conversation, to my mind, is absolutely the fiscally responsible thing to do. You budgeted, I shouldn't say, the previous board last year, 2 months ago, budgeted $13 million for this program. It is reasonable for us to try to stay within the $13 million to fully fund it of what is in the 2025 budget, and then look later at whether or not it actually should have more money after we have considered the long-term future of the program. Thanks.
Madam Chair, I move to call the question. I believe everybody has made their own comments. This is not debate team. Everybody has stated their position accurately, so I think we're ready for a vote.
I think that was a second from Director Harwick. I see no other hands in the queue. Are you all right if we just go ahead and proceed then? Director Busey? Okay, all right. So we will go ahead and proceed to a vote, and I will call roll. Hold on, I have to get my classroom roster. Director Busick, how do you vote?
No.
On this amendment? Thank you. And again, we're voting on the amendment before us, not the original motion. No. Okay, Director Chandler.
Yes.
Director Chandler is a yes. Director Harwick.
No.
No. Okay, Director Nicholson.
Yes.
Director Nicholson is a yes. Director Pagliari. How do you vote on this amendment?
Sorry, yes.
Yes. Okay. Director Whitmore.
No.
No. And I am a no. The motion to amend fails by a vote of 4-3. So now we return to the original motion on the table, which has not been amended, and we will proceed with that. We've had very robust discussion on both the previous motion to amend and the original. So I seeing no hands raised, I'm going to go ahead and call for a vote. Director Busick, how do you vote?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Director Chandler?
No.
No? Okay. Director Harwick?
Yes.
Yes. Director Nicholson?
No.
Okay. Director Pagliari?
No.
All right. Director Whitmore?
Yes.
And I am also a yes, and that motion will carry 4-3 to vote to continue authorizing on demand as previously requested and I will say pledged. I apologize. I lost my script for a minute there. Moving on, our second item is the contracted security services contract. Try that 5 times fast. For the board of directors to approve the summary scope of work for a solicitation and to subsequently authorize the general manager and CEO or her designee to enter into a contract for security services. Do we have a motion?
So moved. Busick,
I-
second.
Whitmore and Busick. All right, I would like to ask Lynn Horn, Acting Co-Chief of Police and Emergency Management, and Michael Malaj, Senior Manager of Commuter Rail Contracted Services, to present this item. Welcome, gentlemen. You may proceed.
Thank you, Chair Rusher. As described, we're here to discuss the contracted security services, and I start just with a brief overview. So the current security contract with Allied Universal Security Service sunsets on June 30th, 2025. The current contract with Allied was a 3-year contract with 3 one-year options. It was awarded on July 11, 2019, following an open and competitive solicitation process. The initial contract term expired on June 30th, 2022, and followed 3 separate board approvals. The agency executed each of the 3 options. Again, we're in the 3rd and final option year that sunsets on June 30th, 2025. No additional contract options remain available. RTD is seeking a new solicitation, which will entail an open and competitive procurement process that will consist of a request for proposals from qualified vendors. Again, staff is seeking approval of the summary of scope of work for solicitation, as well as authorization for the general manager and CEO or her designee to enter a contract for security services. And as many of you know, the police department is increasing our staff, and by doing so, that has enabled us to have a cost savings from scaling down the RTD security contract over the past 2 years. The intent of the successor contract will support PD's efforts to grow its police department. And one thing I want to stress with this new security contract is that the majority of the security personnel will be underarmed, which is an adjustment from the existing contract. It's important to stress that transit police and security, we work in partnerships. And this model of RTD and a third-party vendor increases a greater sense of personal security and safety amongst employees, customers, and the overall community. And even the contracted security provides a great level of security service for employees, facilities, and numerous properties. Security has been successful in de-escalating and resolving issues and also offering customer support along the system. Additionally, this contract will provide for a second crew member as required by 49 CFR Part 218. The primary reason for 2-person crew requirements is to enhance the safety by allowing for better communication, monitoring of conditions, and response to potential issues during train operations. And the second crew member also serves as, fare inspectors on board commuter rail concerts. RTD has great partnerships with, other law enforcement agencies. One example of that is secondary employment, which we currently utilize mostly is Denver, Lakewood, Aurora, and Thornton. And what these agencies do for us is what these agencies. Am I getting a lot of feedback?
You're fine. Someone was unmuted.
Okay, sorry. And what these agencies do for us, they provide additional, basically patrol services. They monitor RTD facilities. When certain issues arise, they'll, ride buses and trains, sometimes in uniform, plain clothes, and most importantly, they are deployed based on the needs of RTD. We also have great partnerships. Sorry about that. We also have great partnerships with our federal partners, such as the Viper team, which is the Visible Intermodal Prevention and Response Team, which is basically an extension of TSA. And for those that don't know, they were immensely, helped us out immensely at Denver Union Station when fentanyl and et cetera was extremely rampant in the area. And they also provide resources for us, such as detection of weapons and explosives. And the last partnership I speak of is our partnership with the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. Again, another federal partner that enables us to receive, classified information and greatly assist us with, asset protection of critical infrastructure. And again, they're just a oversight of, the security works, big picture. So again, we're just requesting that for approval for the summary of scope for solicitation for the contracted security service, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Madam Chair, you're muted.
Thank you. I was muted. Okay.
That's kind of nice.
You're out of order, Director Busick. All right. So with that, we will take questions first. Thank you, Mr. Horn, for entertaining us this evening. I'm going to go ahead and ask for questions first. Again, just clarifying questions, then we'll get into discussion if needed. So I don't know who raised their hand first, but I did see Director Pagliari, so I will go ahead and recognize you. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Chair Rusha, and thank you, Co-Chief, for your presentation. And I will be requesting more discussion on this evening, Chair, but I will stick to my question, which is more or less, will we see a final number of how much this contract will cost before signing into an agreement with the provider? Thank you.
I will go ahead. I see that our General Manager and CEO has her hand raised. So Ms. Johnson, you're recognized, please.
Yes, thank you very kindly. So the action that's before you tonight is seeking approval for a summary scope of work, as well as delegation to enter into a contract. Just by way of background relative to this board putting forward a request to see summary scopes of work. Keeping in mind that we want to have an open and fair solicitation, we are providing an overview of what's contained, what will be contained within a summary scope of work, not the specificity in reference to certain tasks and deliverables and things of the like, because that wouldn't provide an open and fair competition relative to standard procurement practices. And so in relationship to the question, simply put, that was not what we had put forward as a request before you. But if that is the desire of the board, then it could be a two-step approach as well as we go forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Director Whitmore, I saw your hand up earlier. Did you want to speak?
It was not a question. I will wait for the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Director Nicholson, do you have a question for us? Or not for us, but for staff?
I do have a question for staff, actually. I was wondering, just for Mr. Co-Chief, Co-Interim Acting, I screw it up all the time. I'm so sorry. Chief Horn, can you walk me through a little bit in terms of the FRA and the use of the second crew member there? Because you mentioned it, and I'm still not very familiar with how that works. And with regard to security, because in terms of what role they play in that and how that complements what the Allied contract is going to do.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, I know
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Directed this to Dr. Horn, but I think this is more suitable from an operational vantage point. And so for all intents and purposes, when RTD commenced with its operation, with the contracted services, the concessionaire agreements with the A, B, and G line, there basically was not operation. Well, I would say that there was not any foresight relative to ensuring that there was a 2-crew member, considering that this agency had traditionally operated light rail that falls under the auspices of the Federal Transit Administration. In reference to going forward and working with the concessionaire, RTD put forward a model that is recognized and approved in the operational plan that was submitted to the Federal Railroad Administration that calls out relative to Code of Federal Regulations 49, Part 218, that in fact there needs to be a secondary crew member, recognizing that this is not analogous to operating a bus, that you have a lead car and that you could have subsequent following cars, that there needs to be an individual that's not responsible for the operation of the consus that could address matters outside of operational needs. As we go forward, we have leveraged security to serve as that second crew member, in addition to operating as a fare inspector. This is required of all railroads that are carrying passengers. You see this with intercity passenger rail as well as with commuter rail. And as we go forward, recognizing that we do not have the personnel, and as it's outlined in our operating agreement that was submitted to the Federal Railroad Administration for concurrence and sign off, that's how it's specified. I see Mr. Jensen has come on camera, and sir, please feel free to correct any statement that I may have made which didn't capture the essence of what we're doing with the FRA.
Chair Rusha, if I may.
Absolutely.
I really don't have much more to offer. I think that Ms. Johnson summarized it very well. It's a requirement of the FRA, the federal government, to have a 2-person crew, and the contract requires it, as she said. So we could talk about the specific duties and responsibilities, but that would be getting into the weeds quite a bit. But they do serve the function as a second crew person, as regulated by the FRA.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Johnson, your hand is still up. Oh, okay. Director Banker, you are recognized.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. 2 questions. I'm looking at the Transit Police and Emergency Management section of the budget, and it shows that we're going to be hiring 73 new officers, I assume, this year. Could you then, could you explain to me then how we're going to have a dual system? So we're going to have our own employees, and then we're also contracting for security services? Or is the goal to make them all RTD employees in the next year or 2? I guess that's my question. So we've got 2 different operations going, one RTD employees, one a security contract.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Director Banker, for the question. Currently, RTD has the model whereby we have security. We have 2 types. We have transit security specialists and transit security officers. The officers are ones that are armed. Recognizing where we are, without getting too ahead of myself, the intent here relative to what you saw in the budget is to offset some of the costs going forward relative to building out our own police force. And so as we look at putting out a solicitation with various options, without showing my hand, considering that we need to work on a scope of work for open and fair competition for proposals to be submitted. The whole element is building out additional police officers to handle more of the specific needs that we need around the system from a policing vantage point. The security personnel would assist, and Dave Jensen can speak to this, as this would be under his auspices with light rail, but serve as those fair inspectors on light rail and helping to mitigate other issues that may take place on our rolling stock.
Okay, to make sure I understand, so the goal is they will at some point all become RTD employees, and this would be a short-term contract?
So when we say a short-term contract, can you qualify that for me? Because I don't want to make an assumption.
Maybe no shorter than a year.
If I could,
maybe.
Director Banker, you're free to dialogue. Director Banker, hold on a second. You two may go ahead and dialogue until your questions have been answered. Proceed, please. Good.
Well, my question then clearly is, at what point do we make the transition from contract to RTD employees?
So basically, we will assess that as we go forward, but where we are currently situated, we do not have the infrastructure in place relative to absorb. If you keep in mind where we are in Chief Horn could speak to this as well, but relative to having a source of space with designated locations. Right now, we have our police department as a subset of one of our operating divisions as we go forward, and recognizing where we are holistically, making other informed decisions about fare collection with an open system as we look to create a welcoming transit environment. It is our intent to have some aspects of our system be closed, which would necessitate some, when I say closed system, let me clarify. We have an open system whereby you do not need to use fare media to access fare gates or access transit vehicles. And in relationship to a welcoming transit environment, we brought forward to this board, and there was a board resolution whereby we talked about going forward that there could be the closure of the bus concourse, whereby anyone entering it would need to have adequate fare media. Therefore, you would need to have the same number of personnel. So while I can't say the time period in a finite way because there's other elements that are ongoing, basically, for all intents and purposes, it's probably likely that this contract would be in a 3-year-ish time frame.
Okay, and one more quick question. Would all of these folks then also be responsible for fare inspection?
Would all of them be responsible for fare inspection? So, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And just as a clarifying point too, because I didn't say it as well as I should have, we will need to supplement with contracted services, throughout the term of the contract. So I just wanted to make sure I ended with that because I sort of said it in a kind of skewed way. Thank you.
Thank you both. All right, it is 6:46 for the record, and we will proceed and let everyone have a chance to get their questions in. Director Nicholson, I think, or I'm sorry, I'm not sure who raised their hand first, but I'll go ahead and call on you, Director Nicholson, and then Director Chandler, you're next. Thank you.
All right, I have a very quick question. GMCEO Johnson, how confident are you that this contract will stay within the budget that you have allocated here? Is there any chance that you'll be coming back in 2 months or 3 months or 6 months and asking for 15% more in order to fulfill the cost of the contract?
I can say most certainly we wouldn't come back in 2 months because we wouldn't have a contract within 2 months.
But do you expect that there's any
Director
reason
Nicholson.
sorry, my apologies. Do you expect that there's any reason that
Director Nicholson, would you like to ask a follow-up question?
My apologies. Yes, I would.
You may proceed.
Still getting good at this. I'm genuinely not used. GMCEO Johnson, is there any circumstance under which this contract would require additional funds?
Recognizing that we're before you this evening, are you talking about the existing contract that we currently have?
So that, you're asking to allocate additional funds to allocate funding, I should say additional. This agenda item asks for, I think it's $3 million to go out and solicit for the Allied for a contract with Allied, correct?
No, that's incorrect, sir.
I apologize.
Basically, what I want to clarify for everybody assembled, what we are seeking here, we anticipate putting forward a solicitation going forward. Now, keeping in mind, in relationship of where we are with this contract sunsetting June 30th, there is a possibility that we would need an extension contingent upon what this board decides to do going forward. Because right now we're in February and the contract sunsets at the end of June. We're basically talking about 4 months in reference to having an open and fair competition and negotiating with a successor vendor. And so basically there could be the possibility where I have to come back to this body and ask for a contract extension. And there could be some funds associated with that. But for all intents and purposes, those funds may be, I would say, a wash relative to where we are with a successor contract, because that may start later and may not start on July 1st if we had to extend.
Okay. I do have
Director
further questions,
Nicholson?
but I'll ask outside the meeting.
Thank you. Okay, I'm actually going to pause for a second. Director Chandler, thank you for being patient. I'm going to ask, is our general counsel on this call tonight?
She is.
Miss Snyder, I'm going to call on you, and I think this might help address what I'm sensing was happening in this meeting. But could you briefly just briefly educate us under the delegation of authority, what matters does RTD need to bring before us that would not otherwise be covered in the delegation of authority? I guess more specifically, I'm asking, are we seeing this action item, which is just a request to, a request to put out a bid for services? Is that because it is required under our current delegation of authority as it's a security matter?
Yes, thank you, Chair Rusha, for the question. This is Melanie Snyder, General Counsel. So under the board's delegation of authority to the GM and CEO, there are certain carve-outs where the board has said that the GM and CEO needs to come to the board in advance of posting a solicitation and get approval of the summary scope of work that will be posted, and also the board needs to approve the contract. So this recommended action before you is attempting to do both of those things in one action. The carve-outs have to do with contracted security services, not our secondary police officers that we retain, just the Allied, just the services that Allied provides currently. So contracted services is one area, lobbyist contracts is another area, and then consulting services for major studies. So things like our Northwest Rail feasibility study that was done, or the facilities and fleet transition plan. Those are the subject matter carve-outs.
Thank you, General Counsel Snyder. Director Chandler, thank you for being patient. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Rusha, and thank you very much, Ms. Snyder. You actually may have answered my question. I might ask for another clarifying question, because that actually was my question. The Allied question before us about Allied is also not only just the scope of work, but it's also authorizing the contract. So we're doing both of those things at this one time, and that is correct. Am I right?
Chair, if I may?
Yes, please.
Yes, that is correct. And this is actually consistent with other recommended actions that are under those delegation carve-outs. That's also the similar approach that staff has taken, so that the board doesn't have to hear the matter twice.
All right. So that clarification is that tonight would not only be validating the scope of work, but then allowing CEO Johnson to enter into contract with whoever she chooses under that same scope of work.
Chair, if I may, I do see
yes,
our CEO's hand raised. I'll just to answer the question quickly.
Yes, please.
That is correct. The board with this action is authorizing and approving the summary scope of work that will be included with the solicitation, and also authorizing our GM and CEO after the agency goes through the competitive solicitation process, authorizing her or her delegee to sign the contract.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder. Ms. Johnson, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for the record, because when the question first was asked by Director Chandler, she mentioned Allied Security and said for this contract with Allied Security, we do not know who this contractor would be. And I just wanted to state that for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Director Pagliari.
Thank you, Chair. This is Director Pagliari. What I would like to do, I think, is propose or put forth an amendment and then have discussion on the amendment to save time instead of discussing it and then proposing.
If you'd like to offer an amendment, you may.
Okay. I would like to offer an amendment to change the language from for the board of directors to approve the summary scope of work for a solicitation and to subsequently authorize the general manager and CEO, GM/CEO, or her designee to enter into a contract for security services. I think I would like to amend that to strike the second part, which is to be removed, and to subsequently authorize the general manager and CEO and her designee to enter into the contract for security services.
Thank you. That is a valid motion to amend, and that's accepted. Do we have a second?
Second.
I think that was Director Nicholson. Was that who I
Correct.
heard? Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, so we have a motion on the table and a second to essentially strike the subsequent authorization to enter into a contract, which would require the GM CEO to come back at a future date and ask for us to award said contract to whomever was chosen through the process. I see a few hands up for discussion. Director Pagliari, I'll let you go first because this was your proposed amendment. You may speak.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so to be transparent, the reason I'm doing this is GM CEO Johnson said that we could potentially do this earlier in the meeting. And I think for a contract of this scope with so many eyes on it, it's very important to get the ball rolling and allowing the general manager to begin the process of this. And then two is I'd much prefer to express our obligation to vote and actually approve these large contracts. And then some background. There's additional concerns that I have chosen not to include in the amendment language. Specifically, when I was running my campaign, I got a lot of feedback from both operators and transit users that they didn't feel like the RTD had a presence on the system. Specifically over in my district on the W line, you don't really ever see security officers, whether that's contracted or not. That's mostly due to the fact that light rail vehicles do not require a second employee or whatever it's called, as the commuter rail is required, as was discussed earlier. And I really would like to see that changing. So when you go to Union Station and you see the contracted security kind of hanging out, sitting in their vehicles, appearingly not doing anything, which is an easy accusation to make when you don't have background on what they may actually be doing. I would have included language that said we should look at really measuring how many contacts this contract security makes on the light rail and the bus vehicles and other vehicles as well amongst the system, so we can really get them on board and get people who ride the system to see them and have a presence, as well as something that could probably just be discussed as a study session, but switching from fare enforcement to fare collection. So really focusing on just collecting fares from people across the system, especially on lines like the W where there is not a dedicated person that also in their off time collects fares, because as you mentioned, the number one purpose of the person is on the commuter rails. The second employee is not to collect fares, it's to provide safety and other things, but they do collect fares, and I would like to see that on other lines. So thank you for bearing with me. I would welcome your support to just allow us to vote on this again, and I might recommend, Chair, that we put a placeholder on the following March and April and maybe even May meetings. So if a contract needs to be voted on quickly, we have it on the agenda to do that if that's possible. And my final thought is I would really like to know the final cost of this contract before approving it in significant details. And I believe that we can do that in privileged executive session. So if we could potentially be presented some information that why we're choosing one contract over the other, that the public entrusts us and the agency to make those decisions, that is not public information. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Pagliari. Director Nicholson.
Yeah, so I wanted to both echo that a little bit, but also to say that, I trust GM CEO Johnson implicitly to make this kind of decision. But one of the things that I heard extensively on the campaign trail, probably the most important issue to the voters in my district, was security by leaps and bounds. It came up in practically every conversation that I had. And so I think that by taking the time to learn about the contract on offer, to share our thoughts, to engage on this issue in a significant manner, is the way of both deepening our own understanding about what's going on and the choices that get made, as well as demonstrating to the public that we are providing oversight on something that they have decided is extremely important. So that's why I support Director Pagliari's motion. But if push came to shove, I think that GM CEO Johnson is more than capable of choosing a good contract.
Thank you, sir. Director Chandler, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Ruscia. I agree. I don't particularly want to know all of this. I believe that that's why we have a CEO. So although I like the spirit of this, Director Pagliari, I don't think that's really appropriate. Perhaps if we need to talk more about the scope of work, or we as directors need to learn more about the scope of work. But I would hope that we would come with the scope of work and not be voting on the individual contract. I think that's why we have a CEO. So although I understand the spirit of what you're asking, I just think that at this time it would be inappropriate. I would hope that if we have additional questions about the actual dollars or all of that, we can discuss that. But as far as asking a double vote, I would be against that, because truly it's not our place to know those details. That's why we have a CEO. It is ours to come up with, yes, we like the scope of work, and yes, we agree with what we're trying to accomplish. I ran on safety and security. Those are my biggest things. And so by no means am I putting this aside. So probably maybe we need to tighten up the scope of work, but I don't think we need to push that back onto us as directors or take that away from the CEO.
Thank you, Director Chandler. Do we have anyone? I see your hand is raised, Director Pagliari. Was it raised again, or was that left over from before?
Thank you. It was raised again.
Okay, thank you. So I will call you in a moment. I will just note for the record that sometimes we do this in one swoop, and other times we do this in two steps. Traditionally, I think when it comes to security contracts, they come in two steps, but I have only been on the board. I'm entering my third year, and some of those previous votes were special circumstances or extensions and the like. So it is possible that prior to me being on this board, we did have both a summary scope of work and an authorization in one action item. That being said, I will take chair's privilege and just note that I am in support of this amendment, and I think it's more than appropriate, and we can handle it either way. Director Pagliari, I'll let you go ahead and close unless Director Nicholson really needs to offer one more point. Let's see if we can wrap it up. Director Pagliari, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify my position, the reason I struck this from the proposal amendment, the reason I did my amendment was because I would like this to be a two-step process, just so we can vote on the large contract. The additional things I was saying was mostly background and other requests that I can fulfill on my duties as a director individually. But mostly I ask that we do this so we can start the process, and then when it'll be an over a $2 million contract. When a multi-million-dollar contract comes forward, we can vote on that. I'm not asking to actually vote on the which contract we pick. I do trust the CEO to do that. I just want to vote on the final number, as sometimes we have done in the past, as you said. Thank you very much. And also, it looks like Chris did raise his hand. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Pagliari. So if this motion passes as with the amendment on the table, then RTD would come back with the contract amount, and they would also have a recommended vendor as well, because they would have gone through that process. Director Nicholson, if you could wrap it up, or actually I'll also take Director Chandler.
I was just
but if we could just let's just try to keep our comments to 1 minute or less. Go ahead.
30 seconds even. I just wanted to clarify, and maybe GMCO Johnson can jump in and answer this. If we do strike that second part, then it's not changing your standard delegation of authority. So any contract under 2 million, you would just be able to do the way you normally would. Any contract over 2 million, you would bring it to the board the way that you normally would. So this isn't really doing anything special. It just requires you to go through the normal process for any large contract. Is that correct?
Ms. Johnson, please.
Yes, that would be accurate relative to the delegation of $2 million. But just to clarify to the point, what Director Chandler spoke of, we were trying to do this in a two-step, recognizing where we are. I want to touch upon your earlier question. Chances are, with the two-step approach, we would have to come back for a contract extension, recognizing the steps. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I said at the outset, I couldn't answer your question, but recognizing the selection of a vendor, there will be transition. And also there was a comment made that we could put this on the calendar for March or April. I cannot go forward with a summary scope of work until this is approved by the board. The board meeting is February 24th. The soonest I can get out a solicitation would be in March. And so, keeping in mind that it'd be out on the streets for 30 days, people have to submit proposals. So for all intents and purposes, it looks as if we will have an extension of this current contract. So I just want to manage all those expectations. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Director Chandler.
Thank you again, Chair Rusha. Actually, that was my point. My question was really, what is the time frame? Are we going to be able to accomplish what you're asking us to do? And Director Pagliari, I understand your reasoning. I totally agree that it would be really great to vote on those two things. And perhaps if we had more time, I'm not sure if that could be accomplished. But I also understand that this might cause additional cost, because we would have to extend a contract before we could cause a contract to be engaged, bid and engaged within that time frame. So I understand your heart for this amendment. I'm actually more inclined to vote for it now that you've explained it a little bit better, but I also am very concerned about the cost and the time frame. So I ask that we all thoughtfully think that through before we vote.
Thank you, Director Chandler. And to that point, I'm going to need to phone a friend. Mr. Kroll, can you kindly remind when we typically take a break for meetings? Since I know we're about approaching that time, and I don't know if it was 7 o'clock or another time.
Committee Chair Rusha, this is Jack Kroll, Executive Manager of the Board Office. Typically, we aim to take a break right around the 2-hour mark. And this is for purposes of affording the CART transcription provider a break, as that's a pretty demanding role. My recommendation is if you can wrap this item and the subsequent item prior to breaking, great. But if that next item is going to go longer than a half hour, you might as well take a break following the conclusion of this item.
All right, thank you, sir. So we will go ahead and proceed and get through this action item. And following that, I will actually call for a break a little bit early, with the hopes that we can still adjourn on time. So with that, I see no other hands raised, and we have a motion. Oh, Director Nicholson.
Just a very quick question for GMCEO Johnson. If this amendment passes, would you anticipate any additional costs for the process that you would undergo? And that was Director Banker's, or sorry, not Director Banker, Director Chandler's question, that as to this item, if this were to pass, this amendment, would that cause the contract to cost more money or cause us to incur additional costs?
Committee Chair Rusha, if I may.
Yes, please. Sorry.
Simply put, no.
Thank you. I actually have one final question for our general counsel. Ms. Snyder, do security contracts come before the board irrespective of amount under the delegation of authority, or only when it exceeds $5 million?
Yes, thank you for the question. The security contracts have to come to the board irrespective of the amount. That's what I meant when I said there's a carve out from the $2 million delegation of authority to the GM and CEO. So all of those subject matter areas have to come to the board for approval.
Thank you, ma'am. And they do tend to spark a little bit of discussion before we proceed, from my recollection. So seeing no other hands raised, we are going to vote on the amendment before us, and then we will vote on the main motion. Director Busick.
No.
Director Chandler.
Yes.
Director Hartwick.
No.
Director Nicholson.
Yes.
Director Pagliari.
Yes.
Director Whitmore.
No.
And I am a yes, so that amendment carries, or motion to amend carries, and we are now back to the original motion as amended. Director Whitmore.
I just want to make a statement regarding the co-chief's presentation. Is this the appropriate time?
Yes, of course.
All right. So we've heard about the campaign trails, and I can assure you that we all hear the same thing. Even us 6-year vets, security is job one. I couldn't agree more. I think often I get questioned about how does RTD work with other jurisdictions? Doesn't seem like you're getting any support, or it seems like there's a misnomer out there that we're not utilizing, the officers from Denver or Aurora and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to say to Co-Chief Horn, I appreciated your examples of our officers, our staff, what they do, allied, and then your examples of how we utilize local jurisdictions, because without them, our overall security force is minimized. So appreciate you mentioning that. I don't think we mention that enough when we're talking about security, that it's a team effort with local jurisdictions and our contractors, and obviously your officers as well, Co-Chief. So thank you for doing that. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director Whitmore. And I will also add, Co-Chief Horn, I neglected to remember that you also have a doctorate, so I apologize. I'm messing up on syllables and titles today. But thank you for being generous with your time and bearing with us today. So, with that, I completely forgot where we were in in our procedure.
Main motion.
We're on the main motion. Okay, thank you. I thought so. All right. So, Director Busick, how do you vote on the main motion?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Director Chandler.
No.
Okay. Director Harwick.
With the amended no.
That's a no. Okay. Thank you, sir. Director Nicholson.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I have a yes. Director Pagliari.
Yes.
All right. Director Whitmore.
Yes.
Abby is a yes, and I am a yes. And so that motion will carry 5-2. Mr. Kroll, how long do we usually break? Is it 5 or 10 minutes?
If that's your discretion, I would recommend 10 minutes. That's typically what we've provided the CART transcription
Okay.
staff.
I am in need of a 10-minute break and a tall glass of water, so we are hereby recessed at 7:13 p.m. and we will recommence at 7:23. Thank you.
Okay, I wasn't looking, but clearly someone was playing music, and now I need to know who that was.
That was Brett. Brett, why are you being selfish? Share your joy. What's going on?
I think we should share music when we're waiting.
Yes, exactly. Oh man, because we're not on camera right now. Didn't we? Or did we stop, or did we pause, or something?
We have paused the recording. The transcript still rolls, but we paused the recording. And for the record, I had Lizzo playing before we started our meeting. So
Are we? But we're still streaming, though, right?
I do not believe so.
Yes, we are still streaming.
Oh, well, we're still streaming. What? I also have a medium glass of water. Director Nicholson, you'll have to tell me if I need a taller glass for the rest of our meeting.
I will not comment on that because we are not in session, but I would say that well, I don't know what I'm allowed to say, but I will not comment on that in session.
All right. Well, I will
I-
mute. I'll turn it over to Director Harwick if I need a refill, but it is 7:23, so I would like to call this meeting back to order. If you could turn your cameras back on.
Yes.
So I know you're here.
Yes.
Oh, I guess I should turn mine on back as well. I'm here. Okay. Do we have our quorum? We have a quorum. And we are now reconvened at 7:23 p.m. I hope everyone had a good break and tended to whatever you needed to tend to. So our third item for the evening is the light rail vehicle cameras retrofit. And the recommended action before us is for the board of directors to authorize the general manager and CEO or her designee to enter into a contract with Confluence Security for the purchase and installation of forward-facing, operator-facing in-cab and customer compartment cameras on 157 light rail vehicles for a total cost not to exceed $3 million. Do we have a motion?
Second.
First.
Who is? Wait, I don't know what just happened. Who do we have? I heard Pagliari and whom else? Harwick. Okay. I think we just bent the laws of space-time, but I'll take it. All right. So I would like to ask Dave Jensen, Assistant General Manager of Rail Operations, to present this item. Sir, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair Rusha. Good evening. As introduced, my name is Dave Jensen. I'm the Assistant General Manager of Rail Operations. I have also asked staff to join us to answer any questions that you may have. And so, as has been stated, I'm here this evening to recommend that the Board of Directors authorize the General Manager and Chief Executive Officer or her designee to enter into a contract with Confluence Security for the replacement of existing forward-facing, in-cab, operator-facing, and customer compartment cameras on 157 of our light rail vehicles. This is in order to be in compliance with state regulation. The contract is for the purchase of the cameras and installation work, which can begin immediately at a total not to exceed cost of $3 million. The budget for this exists in the 2025 budget, and no new funds are being requested. For background, in accordance with Title 49, Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR, Part 674, the Federal Transit Administration, or FTA, has delegated its safety oversight responsibilities to the Colorado Public Utilities Commission, or CPUC, who is responsible for the oversight of the safety of rail fixed guideway systems within the state of Colorado. On June 30th, 2022, the CPUC revised number 4 of the Colorado Code of Regulations, 723-7, which is the State Safety Oversight Program standard for rail fixed guideway public transportation systems, requiring all regional transportation agencies, which applies to RTD, to install and use cameras on all light rail vehicles to assist in the investigation of accidents and the management of safe light rail operations. This is due no later than June 30th, 2027. By adopting this recommended action, RTD will be able to remain in compliance to state regulations and further the 2021 to 2026 strategic plan priorities of community value, customer excellence, and financial success by improving the ability to investigate events, accidents, increase public and employee safety, and improve operational safety on the RTD light rail network. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen. No questions from me. Do we have any questions? I see no hands raised. All right, any comments for discussion? No hands. Oh, Director Nicholson. All right, if we can keep it to a minute or less.
Promise this won't be controversial. Director Jensen, Mr. Jensen, are there any technical upgrades that are going to come with these cameras? Are they super high definition? Do they have zoom lenses? Like, I assume there's some actual improvements in the quality and stuff like that we're getting from them. And tell me in as much technical detail as you'd like, because I'm a huge nerd.
Chair Rusha, if I may.
Please.
I'm not a technical nerd, so I won't be able to provide that level of detail. I can say though that yes, that's the purpose of this is to upgrade the system that's currently in place. The PUC does have specific technical requirements that we have to meet, and a lot of that has to do with just what you talked. There's not ultra zoom capabilities, but it is frame rates, refresh rates, it is HD quality, those types of things, crash worthiness. Those are the upgrades that are necessary for the system.
Okay, thank you, sir. Director Nicholson, does that satisfy your question? I don't think we're going to get airport level camera security or whatnot, but it is certainly an upgrade. And my understanding is that this is for 157 vehicles. And Mr. Jensen, correct me if I'm wrong, but the remainder vehicles already meet our what do we want to call it? Our specification or are compliant with PUC rule. So we are, yes, go ahead, sir.
That is correct.
Thank you. All right, so seeing no further hands raised, I will actually ask if we have any no votes on this recommended action. Any no votes? Okay, well, with no votes, I will consider that 7 aye votes. And we will just move by acclamation. This item has passed. For our fourth and final item of the evening is the approval of the 2025 Operations Safety and Security Committee Work Plan. Do we have a motion?
Moved.
Director Nicholson is the
I'll second.
Thank you, Director Whitmore, Nicholson, Whitmore. Okay, so I don't have any particular additions to this item. I'm on the agenda to present it, but I feel like we have almost talked this one to death, including a special meeting. I also sent out a notice earlier just making note of the changes that will be made to the work plan, which is a calendar following our discussions with staff. But with that being said, do we have any other comments either from staff? I see no hands raised, or from Director Nicholson.
Sorry. Can you just present the work plan or ask the staff to present the version of the work plan that we're going to be approving or voting on or something?
Are you asking for staff to approve the work plan or to present the work plan that's in the packet? Is that what you're asking?
Well, the reason I ask is you sent out an email, I think earlier today or yesterday, or it all bleeds together, about changes to the thing. Are those changes part of the item that we're voting on here? Are they going to be added to it afterward, or what's the, how does that work?
Yes, thank you thank you, Director Nicholson. So, I will go ahead and just pull up that email so I can read it for the record, if that helps. But as we've kind of noted, like our work plan is a calendar, and that calendar is subject to change. But it definitely is something that is a signal, of where we're going, what we can expect this year, and of course where things have broad consensus. That's also noted. Mr. Kroll, I see your hand. Did you want to read the bullet list in my email, or may I? I'm going to go ahead and proceed. If not, okay. All right. Just give me one moment here. Clearly, I have limited rate of return after 7 o'clock. Here we go. Okay. So, in addition, so you have, so the work plan that is in the packet was published, or it was wrapped up Wednesday, I believe, and then that was published on Friday. But that work plan was already in the queue before we even had our special meeting last Thursday. So with that, I just sent a follow-up note to the committee, and it's more than appropriate to reference it for the record here. Is that we have moved the service planning and evaluation standards to March, and it's an action item. It'll be a 3-director initiated item. It's possible it will change, but we'll keep it on the calendar for now as a heads up, and we'll let you know if anything changes before March. And then we struck the May discussion item. If we need to go back and discuss, we'll of course re-add that into the calendar, but we're not going to have a discussion for discussion's sake. The PTASP, an external entities presentation, has been added by yours truly for July. That will be a very brief presentation. We have included Director Chandler for our customer bill of rights, which we know the title is a working title. It'll probably be changed, but my understanding is that Director Chandler is working on that with Director Pagliari. We removed the uncalendared IT update, and then added real-time communications as a discussion item in May. And that is per Director Nicholson's request at our special OSS meeting, in which GM CEO Johnson concurred and said that she and staff would be happy to present on real-time communications and a plan moving forward at our May meeting. Additionally, I did request, and this was actually noted in last night's meeting live, I requested that FNP consider the East Colfax BRT external entities report, because that item would fall under either committee, and they seem to have a little bit more room on our calendar. FNP Chair Guzman was very kind and offered to assist in making room on their calendar if they can. If they can't, we will go ahead and find room on ours and hear it in committee. But either committee is more than qualified to hear that discussion item. And of course, we can always join other committees when we choose. And then there was an email that was sent out to our paratransit customers about a potential action item in March to hear recommended changes on our on-demand program. However, as stated earlier in this meeting, that action item will not come before us until May. And so with that, I would just say as a kindly reminder, an action item can be added in one of 3 ways. The chair can add it. The general manager or CEO also has that privilege, or 3 directors can commence with a 3-director initiated action and get the requisite signatures, and then the board office will notify the chair and staff if and when that occurs. So with that, do we have any questions? Oh, Ms. Johnson, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Committee Chair Arusha. I just had a question pertaining to the PTAS with an external entity. Could you expound on that? That's the first I'm understanding or hearing of it.
Yes, absolutely. This was noted in previous notes, but it's been a few weeks, so I will go ahead and clarify. So what I mentioned prior is that we will consider, as permitted, if appropriate, external entities to provide transit industry insight as well as continuing education. And so my intent is to invite either the PUC as our SSOA, sorry, that's State Safety Oversight Agency, to present, or potentially ATU International, as they had a pretty solid presentation at the last APTA conference. So I hope that provides some context. It would be a very brief presentation, and I scheduled it so that it would occur before we present and then vote on our own.
Thank you.
And again, that's, yes, thank you. And also that is subject to folks' availability and time on the calendar. So it is a placeholder for now, but we'll certainly entertain that in the next few months. Director Nicholson?
I was just going to say thank you for the clarification, because when I saw Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, that's something we produced, but you mean in a general sense of thank
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Director Nicholson, I see your hand
I'll
raised.
defer to Mr. Kroll. There we go.
Well, Mr. Kroll, I don't know if you're about to get promoted to general manager or general counsel, but you're recognized, sir.
Well, thank you, Committee Chair Rusha. I just had a question about the changes you were seeking to the work plan for March. In March, I had previously had an action item stated policy clarifying paratransit eligibility relative to changes to local fixed route bus service. And then there was a discussion item slated for March indicating the review of RTD transit service policies and standards. And so what of those two things needs to remain and or change?
Thank you, sir. I might have been looking at a different version because we've had multiple drafts circulating. So in March, we will hear in an action item that is the plan regarding service standards and planning and just that schedule. Because when we talked about this at the retreat, we had hoped for a discussion item prior to voting on the service changes, but because of the calendar, that was a bit of a bottleneck. However, so that would be a placeholder, but it'd be an action item. So you would change the discussion item to an action item, and then the paratransit action item remains as is. Director Guzman, you're recognized.
Thank you. I just wanted to affirm what you had said earlier too about East Colfax BRT. Shout out to Director Pagliari, who attended a meeting in my district last night and was there representing RTD, but we are happy to take that under finance and planning. We will work with the committee to make sure that we schedule that appropriately, and I will definitely ensure that you are aware of when we will have that discussion, and that way everybody can get the updates. If you are unable to attend a committee meeting, please remember that you can review them later on YouTube, or you can simply click on the transcripts as they're posted at the same place. We have our agendas publicly available after the meetings, usually pretty timely, but I will make sure that that gets communicated back to Operations Safety and Security Committee as well. Thanks.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for being generous with our time so that we can get our homework done as well. Any other directors? I'm going to go ahead and yield to General Manager and CEO Ms. Johnson first, and then we'll get to you, Director Nicholson. Ms. Johnson, please.
Yes, thank you, Committee Chair Rusha. Just one comment. I know that there was an adjustment you made reference in your earlier comments relative to service standards. That's a 3-director initiated action, and so just wanted to understand or the directors crafting service standards, and I'm not trying to be cheeky with it. I'm trying to understand because staff is in the midst of working on that, but as I outlined earlier, that we would not be in a position to bring that forward in March, recognizing the production period with board materials and things of the like. So just wanted to ensure that I and my team have an understanding of what the expectation is, since this is an action item.
Yes, ma'am, no problem. So no, we are not crafting service planning standards. That would be well above our pay grades. I did send you a memo about this prior. But that action item, and again, it's still in draft form, but for everyone's edification, that action item would simply require that RTD, the board of directors, excuse me, to approve our service planning standards every odd year. So currently, we actually do have a policy that states we will review and approve every other year, but we've fallen out of compliance with our own board policy. So we're just restarting that old process, bringing us under compliance. And that would commence every other July. It's possible because of the COA or other considerations, we might make that a triennial process. So we'll follow up with staff on the best way to do that. And then additionally, we've had a lot of discussion about our evaluation metrics that are related to service standards. That's a report that was previously produced up and through COVID and then just fell away. Several directors have indicated they'd like to see that come back. And so that action item, again, it's just draft, and we'll have discussion with staff, and the committee will have ample time, to see the language. That also just stipulates that those reports will recommence annually starting in July, giving staff 5 months time to make any enhancements or changes they would like to that report. Previously, we had hoped to see that last April, but for various reasons, we just weren't able to get that off the ground and to hear the item. So that's all it is. We're not touching service planning standard.
No, thank you for the clarification. And I do know that No, I was saying thank you. I do know I have emails in my queue, but recognizing my day-to-day, I did not have a chance. I'm still haven't gotten through email. So thank you for providing me with that clarification.
Absolutely. And I can imagine your box is overloaded more than ours, and I know mine is. So thank you for that, and thank you for your grace. We will definitely continue to work on this in collaboration. Director Nicholson, I see your hands raised.
Yes, thank you, Co-Chair Ruscia. I just wanted to call out the incredible yeoman-esque amount of work that our co-chairs and Co-Chair Ruscia in particular did in preparing this work plan. I know there's a lot of agenda items on there, and there's been a lot of back and forth owing in no small part to a lot of emails from me, and I just wanted to thank our co-chair who has taken this work plan process extremely seriously and who has really shown up in a way that, in my time observing the RTD board, I think, has more dedication to engaging with all of us in an open way than a lot of folks have. So I really appreciate the work you put in on this and the place we got to and the process that was involved in, your patience with me as a new director in learning how all this works.
Thank you, Director Nicholson. Your kind words are noted, although I would be remiss if I did not say that it's Chair Harwick that does all the heavy thinking. I'm just here for comedic relief. And with that, I see no other hands raised. I think we can go ahead and vote. Do we have any no votes on this recommended action? Seeing none, I will consider that 7 yes votes, and the motion passes. And with that, if I'm not mistaken, because now my script is quite out of order with all the notes I've taken, that would conclude our action items for the evening. And with that, I will we'll move on to other matters. Do we have any directors who wish to speak under other matters? Oh, Ms. Johnson, please.
Yes, Madam Chair, we still have a discussion item relative to the service changes.
Oh, My favorite part. I am so sorry.
Madam Chair, I'm good to move on to other matters.
Oh, we're getting slap happy because it's after 7:45. Okay, and I should almost turn this over to Chair Harwick. He looks a little more awake than I am. So with that, I again have totally lost my script, but we do have a discussion item, which is the May service changes proposal, and this is for discussion only. And so I'm in the wrong part of my script. Actually, here we are. Mr. Fred Worthen, Assistant General Manager, Bus Operations, and Mr. Jesse Carter, Senior Manager, Service Development, can now present this item.
Thank you, Chair Rusha. Fred Worthen, AGM of Bus Operations once again. As is customary, we were bringing forth a preview of what we intend to bring to the board for the May 2025 service changes. Again, this is preview only. We still have public meetings that are scheduled before we finalize our recommendations. However, I will ask Jesse Carter, our Senior Manager of Service Development, to discuss our proposals as they stand right now. Mr. Carter?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Worthen. Can everyone hear me? Okay, again, my name is Jesse Carter. I'm the Senior Manager of Service Development. What's typical in May, we do have a number of changes that happen every year around this time, and those typically involve seasonal changes to tripper service and volume of service on certain routes that actually go by either things that turn off during summer or schools and or institutions of higher education. So there are a number of also maintenance issues that are being covered in this service change. And then there's some more notable changes, and I'll give a few examples of that and reference the time. I don't want to anger Director Buzek any further because he was ready to move on to other matters, and I do recognize that. That said, we have a change proposed to add a trip onto the inline, a later trip on Fridays only. We have increase of service on Route 16, which is West Colfax, going to 10-minute headway frequency. We also have a proposal to increase service frequency on the Route 73 to 15-minute service, and the reintroduction of the free Metro ride, which operates in the downtown area on 18th and 19th Streets. Also included is increasing service for weekday service span on the Nederland Boulder service. So with that, I would like to ask Fred, did you have any other further comments before opening to questions?
No, sir. Thank you, Mr. Carter.
Thank you.
All right, thank you both, and thank you, Mr. Carter. I apologize. I didn't mean to skip over you at the end. Service planning and routes are actually one of my favorite topics, so deeply apologize. With that, do we have, Director Whitmore, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Jesse and Fred. I don't want to stall Director Buzek too long, but I think he might be interested in this question. So you're adding another late service on the inline on Friday, which we've been hearing about that for quite some time, and I applaud that. It's wonderful. Why just Friday and not Saturday? I'm just curious if we have numbers that say Fridays is far busier than Saturdays. Because I know a lot of that crowd, it's the entertainment and sports crowd. Just curious for Jesse or Fred if you have any view of that.
Sure.
Mr. Carter?
If I may.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, Director Whitmore, I believe on Saturday, we currently do run a little bit later than we do on Friday.
We already do, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So the Friday trip was, as you mentioned, but has been requested for quite some time.
Okay.
So right now, when we look at that last trip on Friday, it shows it's heavily utilized. So we do feel pretty confident that the later trip will perform well, also based on the fact that it does on Saturday.
Madam Chair, if I can, I apologize for getting about
please.
the Saturday edition, Jesse. Appreciate that. You can tell I'm not a night owl. I'm out there on the inline on those late nights anymore. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you both. Okay, Director Pagliari, I see your hand.
Thank you, Chair. Quick question, and a comment. Thank you very much. I look forward to having 16 10-minute headways. That'll be very exciting. Thank you for your work. Quick question on the 20. Let me make sure I'm looking at the right one. It says Route 20 seasonal service adjustment. Do you, off the top of your head, have in front of you, know what seasonal service adjustment the 20 would be doing?
Chair, if I may.
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, so with the Route 20, we have seasonal tripper service for the East High School. And when it goes into summer session, we suspend that service until fall, then we bring it back. And if you're asking if I know the exact trip, it's far too late in the evening for me to know that.
I'll go ahead and piggyback off that. Mr. Carter, on packet page 19, there is a note that Route 20 will have schedule adjustments to improve on-time performance. I'm not sure if there is, because sometimes we have the same route in different sections. Yeah, I see also on packet page 20, there is a reference to Route 20 and seasonal tripper service. So do we have, I guess, two adjustments addressing two different needs?
Sure, yes. I'm going to answer yes to that. So if I'm reading packet page 22, it reads schedule adjustments along with suspension of seasonal tripper service. So we're doing a running time analysis along with the cancellation of, or not cancellation, but suspension of the tripper service rather.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Well, my packet page says 20, but at this point of the evening, I'm not sure what my middle name is, and it's part of my first name. But either way, I thank you for addressing that. Director Pagliari, does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Carter, for answering that.
Thank you for the question.
All right, thank you. I see Director Nicholson. I will recognize you, and then we will go to Director Guzman.
Yeah, so I really appreciated these recommendations, fairly straightforward to me. I actually had two primary questions related to the process more broadly and sort of our ability to weigh in. What is the proper point in this process if there's additional service that we want to see based on our experiences to let you guys know, hey, there's no, LX bus, for example, anymore from Denver up to Longmont. And that is something that the people in my districts have experienced or I've experienced or that kind of thing. It wasn't clear to me where we fit into that conversation of engaging with you and maybe getting feedback from you guys about how that works and you listening to all of the board members. I don't think Director Banker is on at the moment, but she had expressed as well a very significant desire to have us weigh in on not just the individual service changes that you put in front of us, but the ones that we want to see as well, and bringing those to you. So I was wondering, what that process looks like. And then the second question, kind of on her behalf, but also on mine, who had to take a very long bus ride to get up to Longmont a while ago. Why isn't there an LX bus, and when are we going to get one?
Okay, I'll start with the first question first, Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
Okay, so the first question, as far as when is the appropriate time, it's the same as if I were talking to a customer. So when we're in the process of taking in information for the official or comment period for the service change, yes, there is a defined time. However, we are hearing from customers throughout the year. So in true honesty, there is no right time or wrong time. At any point in time, you can put forward a suggestion. Now, when it will actually be something that we can actually put into service is dependent upon available resources, be that finances, but more importantly, lately, when we have the operators available to actually put that into service, and whether or not it fits with other opportunities. So when we look at our services, we're not just looking at individual routes, but we're looking at the system as a network. And so as we endeavor to implement the system optimization plan, we're going to look at how all the different pieces fit together and whether or not we have interline opportunities, which will further the efficiency of our operation, or whether or not a certain division has the available operators over another division. So we're looking at both opportunity and where it makes sense. And then we also have to throw in there our knowledge or the data that supports ridership information, be it from past and current. So all those go into it, but we want to hear from the board. We want to hear from our customers at all times in the year. And I see Mr. Worthen has his hand up.
Mr. Worthen.
Yes, thank you, Chair Rusha. I would also mention that recommendations are also contingent upon our Title VI analysis as well. So there are there's a broad magnitude of things that we consider. The LX is under consideration for later on in this year, potentially in September, but that is not I would not say that is a certainty yet. We're still evaluating our people power. We will look at the Title VI and go through the priorities for the September service change, but right now we have it preliminarily scheduled for review for September.
Great.
Thank you, sir. Director Nicholson, does that answer your question, or do you
I
have one
very
more
quick follow-up question that they
Super
have been very quick to answer. Mr. Carter, and I guess also Mr. Worthen, but mostly Mr. Carter, would you be willing to meet with the board in a study session as a group to hear our opinions on service changes?
Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm going to defer to both my CEO and GM and also my AGM of bus operations on whether or not that's something that would be appropriate for me as a lower level staff member to do. If it is, I have no problem with it, but I would certainly want to hear and be informed by the chain of command.
Thank you, sir. Jesse Carter is the salt of the earth, for the record. In fact, Ms. Johnson, would you actually care to address that? Because I believe we do have like a planning training coming up soon.
Yes, thank you for
or maybe Mr. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Committee Chair Rusha. And yes, you're right. We do have a session topical. That is because recognizing Mr. Worthen's response relative to Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as we talk about service equity, that's a critical piece. We have to ensure that there's no disparate impact or disproportionate burden relative to minority and low income population. So that's taking into consideration people power and things of alike. So when we go through this process, quite naturally, if there are opportunities whereby we want to hear, of course, we want to hear comments from the board, and we can assess whether or not it's a study session per se, but it should be in alignment with the triannual periods in which we leverage for service changes here at this organization.
Thank you, ma'am. I believe we also have some discussions on the COA coming up later on this year in both primary standing committees, if I'm not wrong. If not, we will head over to F&P and hear it there. I'm going to go ahead and recognize Director Guzman, and then Mr. Kroll, if you still need to speak, we'll go to you next. Thank you, Director Guzman. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'll be quick. Jesse, please thank your team on my behalf. One of the first things that I heard about in the January changes was the loss of the peak trips on the 44. So we're being heard in this district to get downtown. A question, if this can be answered later too, the 19 and the 52 currently are being impacted very heavily by the 20th Street Bridge work, which we have no control over. However, the reroutes have caused quite a bit of misunderstanding about how those routes work, especially along Navajo Street. I'd like that to be addressed somehow. I'm not sure what that would look like. And the 19 drivers are often stuck in that bus without being able to take their appropriate human breaks. to attend to needs because of that deviation in the route. And so consideration for that, as this is a discussion item, I would appreciate. We want them focused and not in pain trying to get us to our next stop. There's reference to the E, H, and D lines all running better frequency and more on time with the Denver downtown rail reconstruction work that's continuing this summer, and any anticipated work that will be done with slow zones, which are thankfully, thank you very much to all of our maintenance of way workers, being lifted as quickly as humanly possible. Are we taking that into consideration for the light rail lines? The N line is one of the few ways on our commuter rail to get to Elyria and Swansea. Thank you for adding that additional trip. The number 9, thank you, just from the West Side community, because that's a little used route, but it is currently being built up around some very interesting things happening in the warehouse district past the bridge from Calumet over to Colfax. In fact, my job has required me to use that route, and it's not efficient to use, so I can't often work in that area unless I walk about 30 minutes to get where I need to be from Colfax or from downtown. So thank you for addressing that. Finally, and I'm just going to put this out here, in the board packet, public hearings are being held on March 3rd at noon, a virtual session at March 3rd at 5:30 p.m. in person at Blake Street, and on March 4th, 5:30 to 6:30 for a virtual drop-in session. Somebody asked how you get information to service planning. It's service.change@rtd-denver.com. That's the appropriate email, or you can call customer care at 303-299-6000, and that's how they get the information from the public and from us when we receive that that incoming email about something that's happened with the lines. So I just wanted to put that out there for y'all, and thank you very much for your hard work and consideration on those matters.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kroll.
Yeah, thank you, Committee Chair Rusha. I just wanted to briefly mention, as you all have now slated for your work plan, not only conversations around the current COA, but also the forthcoming COA and the Finance and Planning Committee's work plan. You've also slated now for conversations around the service policies and standards. And I think that's a more important way of looking at your service changes as opposed to one-off individual routes or requests. I think those will be consistent in their volume to you, but staff is going to always consistently have a better understanding of things, and having a clear understanding and appreciation for your standards and policies with respect to service changes, I think is the best way for you all to influence the service change process.
Thank you for your feedback, Mr. Kroll, and I will consistently ask staff to chuck the SOP and take the 43, run it down MLK so I can access it more easily, but despite being 1/15 of RTD's government, that argument has gone nowhere. I will go ahead and go to Director Pagliari. I see your hand. You are recognized. Proceed.
Thank you, Chair. This is Director Pagliari. I want to quickly say thank you, Director Guzman, for echoing a lot of the things that also benefit my district on the west side. And wanted to quickly call attention to some issues with the 16 and looking forward. Specifically, there's a really inefficient loop around the Federal Decatur station that requires going from Federal to Decatur and Holden, and they recently implemented a Dutch style bike intersection, one of the first in the city of Denver. But unfortunately, we have articulated buses going through that intersection at Holden and Decatur, and it is very difficult for the buses and for pedestrians and for everyone involved. It also takes a lot of time to go through that loop when you're just trying to go from the west side to the downtown. Just pulling attention to that. And then something that I would like, probably we'll be doing more on that in the future, so just keep that some foreshadowing. And then the other thing was I would like to learn more about how operators themselves report issues while they're driving with routes, whether it's from potholes or to, like, for example, Holden and Decatur, where there's a ridiculously tight turn. And others, I think, on the 9 as well, and the one and over on this side of town. But if you could maybe include that in some of the training, or just have it present in your head going forward, and I'll bring it up at more appropriate times. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Pagliari. Mr. Carter, do you have anything else you wanted to share? If not, I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure. In response to Director Pagliari's question about how we hear from operators, there are lots of different forms that they have that they send in to us. We also have a process that 6 times a year we get together on the Run Board Committee, and we just had our Run Board Committee, our pre-Run Board Committee for the upcoming service change May 2025, in which stewards representing the operators are able to have a conversation with us about things that are working, post January 19th implementation of the newest service change, and things that they would like to see addressed. And in those conversations, we do talk about everything from things needing, bushes needing to be trimmed so they can have a good sight line to, make a turn, to actually tight turns, and specifically the Route 1, the Route 40, and a couple, other routes that came up. So your comment is definitely on time and appreciated. But yes, we do listen to our operators. We also go out to the divisions and speak directly to our operators. When I say we, I mean my team that goes out to the different divisions. And so there is a robust conversation that occurs between service development and our frontline employees on a regular basis.
Thank you, sir. So I have a couple of questions for you, Mr. Carter, or to anyone who can answer. But I'm wondering, just in looking at our packet, kind of going back to Director Pagliari's initial question and my comment, is it possible where we have more information, could we include that, maybe in a subsequent memo to the board, and also on our website where we post these proposed changes? I know before we'd entertained, the idea of a chart. I think that's helpful, just because it's a lot to process. And I'm also looking over at seasonal service adjustments. For example, it says reduced to summer levels. Not everyone might know what summer levels mean, or when I look at Route 44 and we talk about adding 2 morning and 2 evening peak direction trips on weekdays, if we do know what those times would be, we should include that. But even just when we're talking about going back to, a previously scheduled service, if it's a seasonal adjustment, I think it would just be helpful to note what it looks like in the other season, so that folks don't have to, follow the trail on Trip Planner and try to, figure out what, previously transpired. So that was just a point of feedback. And then I actually have a question. So on my packet, page 20, under services proposed for enhancement, so Route 225 and the Dash both have service extensions to serve low-income housing developments, which I like, but I was curious if that was in the SOP. I don't oppose it. I actually like if we can be nimble, but is that something that you can address, Mr. Carter? I'd love to hear about it.
Actually, yes, but I'm going to want to speak to my representative on the north side, the lead for the north area, to give more detail on that. As far as it is not necessarily an SOP by itself change, it was something that's been worked on for quite some time in conjunction with Boulder County, providing service to that development, which is a low income development. So, but to give you the dates and times and all the all the efforts that went in there, I would ask that we be able to provide you kind of a better overview of that through the North team.
Absolutely, thank you. And I just wanted to make sure I understood that this was not originally planned several years ago, but we were able to meet needs of community and make that happen. So I think this is a very favorable recommendation. I noted the language didn't reference the SOP.
Right. Chair, if I may?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
I do want to say that this is something that did take years, and it's not just a this year thing. This is something that the team has been working on for a number of years. being informed by both Boulder County and the city of the need and the plan. Once the location was built, it's something that has been in plans for, I want to say, at least 4 years.
Thank you, sir. And I'm also taking that as a hint. I should just keep advocating that we rethink the 43 or at least run the 121 by my house. I'm open to either. Director Nicholson, you are recognized. Let's try to keep it under a minute and then we can wrap this one up. Proceed,
Yes.
sir.
First off, just very briefly, I really appreciate you guys increasing the frequency on the 73. I don't know that I've ever been on it, but it's a major route in central Denver, and so thank you. It goes through both. It hits both. But the second point there that I have is I've heard a number of issues that have come up from actually folks in the area around criminal activity at Fairmount Cemetery and folks using public transit to sort of there's a canal, I think is what it is, that's there. Is there any thought being given, especially considering we're talking about security at the same, earlier in this meeting, when we're increasing service and most likely as a result of that hopefully increasing ridership, to the security implications of doing that, especially in places where, there have been potentially, reports about security incidents being proximate to transit in those areas. So I'm just wondering if that comes up in your analysis and whether that lends, does an increase in frequency also lend to an increase in attention when it comes to security concerns, people, putting security onto those buses, that kind of thing.
Chair, if I may. Okay, thank you for the question. And I'm going to have to say honestly, no, we don't necessarily consider it. And that's the first time I've heard about increased crime in and around the Fairmount Cemetery. That's usually a pretty quiet place for obvious reasons. But at the same time, in looking at we have had to address increased crime at certain stops. And that's when we do reach out to our law enforcement and our security team. And I have to give praise to Dr. Horn and his team, and that we were able to address along with the Aurora Police Department, somewhere near where we had an issue at Havana and Colfax. And I think we've come to meet with some of the folks who actually operate businesses in and around that area to actually, I don't want to say disconnect completely, but disconnect the notion that buses cause crime. So I would use the analogy of buses cause crime like spoons cause me to be fat. They don't. It's all about my habit. It's all about the neighborhood. It's all about the area that you're in. It's not necessarily about the bus, but that's kind of a curmudgeon's view of transit's role with crime.
Thank you, sir. Your curmudgeon view is shared by the chair of this committee. Director Nicholson, does that answer your question?
I was just going to clarify, it's the Highline Canal that runs through the cemetery. That is the location that was raising people's hackles, and that does make perfect sense, and I completely agree. When you give people good access to public transit, you give all kinds of people good access to public transit, and not all of them are good people.
There you go.
And with that, I see no further hands raised, so we will go ahead and close this discussion item. Thank you, Mr. Worthen and Mr. Carter, for your presentation and for being generous with your time in answering our questions. This was a very good discussion. Again, I have completely lost my script, but I think I remember how this goes. Now we can move into other matters. Does anyone have any other matters they would like to raise? Director Nicholson strikes again. You may proceed, sir.
Thank you. I'll
keep it to a minute or less. Thank you.
Yes. As some of you may have heard me discuss earlier, I am putting together an ad hoc committee on customer and community experience and security. that will take place with the chair's announcement sometime in the next week or so. And so I'll be sending out an email about this as well. But if any of you are interested in participating in that ad hoc committee because you are interested in customer experience, customer community experience, and security, that committee will report to this committee, is why I'm bringing it up here. But if you're interested in those issues, please let me know, and I'll be putting together that committee in the next couple of days, week or so.
All right, thank you, Director Nicholson. Director Chandler.
I will make this brief as well. Thank you, Director Ruscia. Director Nicholson and I did a ride-along this last week down the Colfax all the way for the 15. It was really good. I appreciated that ride. We had a reporter from Westward with us as well. But I have a couple of questions and maybe a comment or two. The bus went past Tower Road on Colfax and literally just ended. And it ended in nowhere. And the bus driver was extremely cordial and said, obviously, you need to get off. We have a 20-minute break. But in that 20 minutes, there is no place for him to go to the restroom. There was literally nothing there. So is there a way to maybe make that bus stop 1 or 2 blocks closer? Because there is a 7-Eleven. So at least he could go in and buy a Coke in that 20 minutes and go to the restroom. So that would be one of my suggestions. And it's very awkward because as a bus rider, we got dropped off in a mud puddle. I mean, there was nothing, literally nothing there. So that would be something that would not only make the customer just on that particular route better, but also the driver. And then also, what do we do as I was walking from that bus stop to get to the 7-Eleven? I came across a very, very large and homeless encampment. That I don't know what to do about it, but I think that's something that we get farther out east, specifically in my area. There are very large homeless encampments, and this one was particularly egregious in that there was a ton of trash. It was very, very inhospitable. Let's just put it that way. So I don't know what the process is to report something like that. I did call the city of Aurora and did report it, but I just want to bring that to the attention that perhaps this is something that we can have a little bit more dialogue with the bus drivers and those that are actually on it, that they feel comfortable as a place to talk about those issues. Like what can they do and what can they report? We don't want this to be a tattletale session or a sweeping session, but we also want them to feel safe, and we also want our customers to be dropped off at an appropriate area. So that's the only comment that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Chandler. Code Chief Dr. Horn, are you still with us? Would you like to address the matter raised about, reporting security concerns? Or anyone who might be here with us today who can address that? I think that was a pretty salient point. Is that yes?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, sir. Go ahead. Proceed.
Sorry about that. I'm on my mobile now. So the deal with especially with large encampments, they are a bit difficult, and like every jurisdiction have certain rules and standards that they have to go by in terms of providing assistance for those that occupy homeless encampments. We work extremely close with whether it's Aurora, Denver, because like operators and others, they do call the police department and report large encampments quite often. For RTD, a lot of issues that we run into, some of them may be like close to RTD property, but again, they're in other jurisdictions, territory, if you will. So we have to abide by their rules. And truthfully, some cities have orders or mandates from like their city management or city leadership that they have, chosen not to take certain action against, you know what I mean, or certain enforcement, I should say, at certain locations. So we do partner with them, but as far as what actually occurs, really, lies with those jurisdictions.
Thank you, sir. So if somebody wanted to reach out, would it be appropriate for them to use the Transit Watch app or call the 303-229-2911 number?
Yeah,
Or
even using, the Transit Watch app is useful because that way at least we get them, and we have like commanders that has, relationships, and we kind of keep tallies and tabs on how many complaints we get at certain locations. And sometimes it's a lot easier for, transit police commanders to work directly with, police department, and other officials from those jurisdictions. So again, I would highly encourage using the Transit Watch app because those will get routed to us.
Okay, thank you. And I don't want to take us into a rabbit hole, but now I don't know the answer to this, so this might help everyone. If someone elects to use the Transit Watch app, does that go through the same dispatch, or does that get to the same person as if someone had called or texted into our lines? Or is one more of a direct way of communication, I should ask, or is it all the same?
It's all the same because it goes to our dispatch center in essence.
Okay. Thank you for educating me on that one. I see that Director Nicholson has his hand raised again. Do you have something else for other matters, sir?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to call out very quickly in response to what Director Chandler said. We both did that ride along. And one of the reasons why it went well when we had to answer questions for an hour on the 15 bus is because Chief Communications and Engagement Officer Stuart Summers did a ton of work preparing us for that interview and prepared a fact sheet and had a meeting with us. And we both went in knowing all the stuff we could talk about and had everything at the ready. So I just wanted to call that out because he put in a lot of work. And for any other directors who are on here, interviews are great, and just do the same thing. Talk to Stuart. He will get you all prepared. It was a wonderful experience in large part because of his help.
All right. Thank you, sir. Next time you come visit my district, ping me. I'll join you on the bus. So with that, we have no other matters to discuss, and our next meeting date is March 12, 2025, where we will convene again at 5:30. That meeting is going to be very busy with discussion items on the following. We have the Title VI program update, downtown rail reconstruction, our annual safety report. I believe we have fare collection strategies and tactics, although I have to double check on the calendar with that one. An update from our police department, which I had calendared for April, but perhaps it's March. I'll double check. And then, as previously noted, a potential action item just regarding service standards, planning, and evaluation metrics, and when we convene on that. And again, you will be noticed well in advance if that action item is coming next month. So, seeing no other discussion, our meeting is adjourned at 8:25 p.m. Good night, and thank you all.
Thank you.